This type of Bentley won at Le Mans 68 years ago. It's the 4.5 litre model. In fact, it's almost identical to the car I took on this year's classic Mille Miglia, the reenactment of the daunting 1,000-mile road race around Italy. I must say I had a fairly jaundiced view of pre-war classic cars. That was until I sat behind the wheel and tap danced my way around Italy. Yes, I did say tap dance. That's because in a contemporary car, you use your basic, natural, subconscious instincts to drive the car. But in this car, the Bentley, the middle pedal is the accelerator and the right-hand pedal is the brake. So when you have one of those rather dodgy moments and your right foot's on the accelerator and you want to go on the brake, then if you go to the left, you go onto the clutch. So when you eventually find the brake on the right, you've not only missed the turning, you've scattered the goat herd and ended up back in the vineyard yet again. And you think that's bad, then there's the gear change. When I was first acquainted with this car, I was told how to change the gear. You have to doubly clutch on upshift and downshift. You have to count to approximately 2 seconds before you engage the next gear. You mustn't use more than about 2,500 revs. Sounds complicated? It was, and it certainly is. And then there's stopping, the brakes. This car weighs 1.5 tons and it has 4 16-inch drum brakes. You've got more chance of winning the national lottery than stopping this car quickly. So if you don't mind, I think I'll concentrate on driving and get on the way to Oulton Park. This car is no typical 4.5 litre Le Mans type Bentley. It was the original show car from the 1928 London Motor Show. W.O. Bentley built this model as a high-performance sports car to improve the marque's competitiveness on the track. Whilst this is the 4-seater, the 4.5 litre came in many different guises. That's because customers in the 1920s could order cars to their own personal specifications, all for the princely sum of 1,000 golden guineas. It's now worth 180 grand. The chassis is steel channel section with cross members and suspension is semi-elliptical springs with double shock absorbers on the front. Filling up is done here, a credit card melting 45-gallon Le Mans spec tank. And the MPG, a highly respectable 16 miles to the gallon. Not bad for a 70-year-old car. The big lights and grille just say Bentley. And under the bonnet is the 4-cylinder 16-valve engine pushing out 110 brake horsepower. In fact, in its day, the 4.5 litre Bentley was a remarkably advanced car. It had brakes on all 4 wheels as opposed to 2 on more humble cars. It had a 4-speed gearbox, it had twin carburetors, there was a widespread use of aluminium, it had 2 spark plugs and 4 valves per cylinder, attached to a single overhead cam, an arrangement copied by Triumph 40 years later in the Dolomite Sprint. The 1928 Autocar road test simply effused about this car. They said it was one of the most pleasant and exciting cars to drive. A driver in tune with it would feel in full control, and that the car would do everything asked of it. Well, let's find out. In terms of performance, the car is surprisingly nippy, helped by the massive torque and pulling power of the low-revving engine. In fact, motor in 1928 achieved 90 miles an hour at 3,500 revs. At a time, in fact, when the legal speed limit on the road was 20 miles per hour. This car, in fact, can do 105 miles an hour. And as for handling, well, the steering is not exactly light, and the only power assistance comes from here. And then there's the chassis. Well, it's a bit like a Morgan in the sense that you feel every bump on the road. And also with this car, the chassis actually flexes as you go over an undulation, although I'm told that's what it should be doing. Bentley is probably the earliest British car that anybody associates with success on the racetrack, something now we've become rather used to with the great success of British motorsport. In fact, Bentley rather dominated Le Mans in the 1920s, and in 1928 won Le Mans with the 4.5 litre in the hands of Wolf Bonato and Bernard Rubin at an average speed of just under 70 miles an hour. My overall impression is, given its age and apart from the pedal arrangement and gear change, is that it's a remarkable car with some very pleasant driving characteristics. So it makes me wonder what car manufacturers have been doing for the last 70 years. It beats me.